Thank you for joining us here today on From the Heart, where we tell stories of life because life is interesting. Today I have with me as my guest Mr. Bill Robertson. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
I'm so glad that you came and sit down with me. I'm looking forward to all the history that you're going to tell us and all the exciting things that you've been able to do in your life.
Well, I don't know how exciting it'll be to some of your viewers, but
I'm sure it'll be good.
But we'll go for it.
Okay. So, you grew up here in New Albany?
Yes. My family, my mother and father lived here. I was actually born in Memphis, but we owned a house here. And, of course, after I was born, then I was here, grew up here. Graduated from high school in 1963 and left here and went to Mississippi State, play football, and that didn't work out, so I transferred to Ole Miss, where most of my family had already graduated. So I graduated from Ole Miss in 1967.
What did you major in?
Well, I was when I went to Mississippi State, I thought I wanted to be an engineer, but the calculus course met at 7 o'clock 5 days a week, and I wasn't into that, so I switched to business.
Yeah.
And got a Bachelor of Business Administration degree from Ole Miss.
Well, nice.
Mostly devoted to economics and finance. After I left there, I went in the military, served my time there, and began that part of my life. And then when I got out, I went to Memphis and found a job with National Bank of Commerce, working in their credit department. I was there for about a year and a half. I became discouraged a little bit because it wasn't moving fast enough. And the Schlitz Brewing Company was going to put a brewery in Memphis, and I had known and gone to school with one of the children whose father was on the board at Schlitz, so I contacted them, and Memphis, our bank, wound up getting their business.
Oh, wow.
And but they never recognized me for it, so I started looking for another job. And I found one working in the mailroom at Chevrolet Motor Division in Dallas, Texas, in the regional office.
In the mailroom?
In the mailroom.
Wow.
So I packed up everything in my car and drove to Dallas. And I was on my own, didn't know anybody out there, and started over out there. I was in the zone office there. I got moved from the region to the zone in Dallas, and I worked there for about a year and a half. And then they put me out in the field as a district representative calling on Chevrolet dealers. I went up to Enid, Oklahoma, spent a year there, went to Lawton, Oklahoma, spent a year there. Then I moved into Oklahoma City, and I was the Metropolitan District Manager for Oklahoma City. During that time, General Motors decided to build a plant in Oklahoma, and I used to chauffeur the chairman of the board and executive vice presidents around and show them what Oklahoma and Oklahoma City had to offer.
Got them some barbecue?
I did, and they decided and built the plant there. It's on the south end of Tinker Air Force Base.
Oh, wow.
And it was the newest plant they had built in 25 years. I spent 5 years as zone business manager, and then they moved me to Detroit. I spent a little over about a year in Detroit. I was assistant national business manager, and I covered the United States. Had 5,000 Chevrolet dealers and their business managers. I worked with them in managing the dealers' business. From there, I didn't like Detroit. It didn't offer much. And so I left there and moved back to Oklahoma and was in the automobile business in Woodward, Oklahoma, Toyota dealership and General Motors franchise. And I spent about 2 years there, and then I'd always wanted to be a stockbroker, so a friend of mine in Houston, Texas called me and said they were opening a new office for Merrill Lynch in Houston. If I was interested, come interview.
Wow, from cars to stockbroker,
yeah. Well,
that's
actually,
a big difference.
The first job I applied for was with Merrill Lynch in Jackson, Mississippi when I got out of college, and they told me I didn't have any sales experience. So I guess I went and got some sales experience and went back. And I'd been reading the Wall Street Journal and studying finance since I was a junior in high school. And so it always interested me. So when I went back down to Houston and interviewed, they hired me. And I moved to Houston. And I worked there, and then they sent me to New York. I spent a year in New York working for Merrill Lynch, right across from the One World Trade Center.
Oh, wow.
In the financial district on Wall Street.
What year was that?
That was in 1980. And I lived right across from Madison Square Garden. I used to catch the subway.
Wow.
And get off at One World Trade and walk across the mezzanine to the Merrill Lynch building. And then from that point, I went back to Houston, and Dean Witter, which was an old financial firm, I went to work for them and moved my business over there, and Morgan Stanley eventually bought out Dean Witter. And I was there 5 years, and I was home on vacation. The oil business had taken a downturn. People were leaving Houston as fast as they had moved in, early in the late 70s. So I was home on vacation, and somebody told me the hardware store here was for sale. And my grandfather, of course, had moved here in 1903 and bought that hardware store out from the King family. He and his partner Potts, and Hamilton Hardware. There's a lot of people around here recognize that name. Was here for 101 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
So I had it. I bought it back into the family and ran it for 20 years.
Wow.
And then that pretty well culminated my business side of life at that point. But I had other investments that I had made that proved out very, very worthy. And I stayed around. I wanted to go back to Texas. I always enjoyed the West. And I even had relatives out there, but I never did get to make that move at this point. I haven't made that move.
Right.
But then I stayed around here and more or less just got involved in some civic activities and things like that, and tried to help make New Albany a better place to live and give back to it, because it had been so good to our family through the years.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit to your grandparents. Tell me about how they ended up in New Albany.
Well, my grandfather and my grandmother Hamiltons, they lived in Poolville. He had a store out there, and he had an opportunity to move to New Albany, so they sold that business, and they came to New Albany in a wagon in 1903.
Wow.
And there was a fellow named Potts, and my grandfather went to work for the King family and King Hardware. And they started a buyout program, and in 1909 they owned the business, and it was Potts Hamilton Hardware. They were a lot more aggressive, and they were the first authorized car agency in New Albany. They had Studebaker.
Oh, wow.
And then later my grandfather turned in his franchise for Studebaker and got Ford. Ford started building cars in Memphis, I believe, and they'd ship them here in a wooden crate with a steering gear and the wheels attached to it. And they'd put them together and roll them out the front door.
I didn't know they did that.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they had to be assembled on site.
Yeah, everything was except the wheels and the steering linkage.
Yeah.
The early Fords, the Model Ts.
I guess that's the reason why Ford did them that way, is so they would be more affordable.
That's right. Well, my grandfather, he told the Ford Motor Company, and I've got a copy of the letter, I think, where he wrote them, and he'd just taken it on, and he told them not to ship him any cars right now for Lee County. He had a salesman over there to sell cars for him, but the cotton crop hadn't come in yet, and nobody over there had enough money to buy a car.
Wow.
But he was like a distributor. He had people in Ripley and Tupelo and places like that selling cars for him.
Wow.
Yeah, he'd been a Ford dealer probably 25 years in the 30s when he sold it to a fellow named Sperry Cole. Yeah.
Well, what about your grandma? What was the most memorable thing about her?
About my grandmother?
Uh-huh.
Well, she was just a sweet little lady that held the family together. I mean, she was just a regular, like a grandmother should be.
Yeah.
She was always there. When my grandfather passed away in 1951, I was starting school, and she lived around the corner from the school, so during the week I would stay at her house because nobody else was there.
Right.
And then my mother would pick me up on Friday, and I'd go to my house, which was actually just across the river bridge, but it was easy for me to get up in the morning and walk around the corner to school.
I imagine it was.
Yeah.
What was her name, your grandmother's name?
Octavia.
Octavia. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty name.
Yeah. Yeah, she was a Foster, Octavia Foster, and that was her maiden name.
And what was your grandfather's name?
Haywood, Thomas Haywood Hamilton.
That's unusual. Is that a family name?
Yes.
Haywood?
Yeah, his family came from over in Alabama, Allsboro, Alabama. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I took a picture to the museum. They have it over there. and it was a picture of my grandfather and some of his brother-in-laws in a cornfield as a baseball team. And I told Jill Smith, Kevin Costner just thinks he had the first Field of Dreams. The first Field of Dreams was at Poolville, Mississippi, and I think the picture was dated 1889.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to find that.
Yeah, she's
that would
got
be
it.
so neat to see.
Yeah. So, yeah, my grandfather was back then everybody was a big baseball fan.
Right. And so you played baseball too?
I played baseball, predominantly football. We won the Little Ten Championship in 1962. The first time in the history of the school we'd ever won it.
Wow.
And I think, as I told you earlier, I've always been a competitor. I learned at an early age in a pool room, believe it or not, that if you didn't play somebody better than you were, you never could improve your game.
Right.
So that was a learning experience at a young age that instilled in me that if you wanted to get ahead, you had to work and apply yourself.
What was your mom's name?
Eula May. And my dad was William T., same name. And he was from South Mississippi in Forest. And my mother had gone to school and graduated from Ole Miss in the 30s, and she was teaching school in Forest where she met my dad. He was fixing to go in the Army for World War II.
Oh, wow.
And they married in 1941. I was born in 1945, right after World War II. My dad's family had actually come into Mississippi in the early 1800s when they signed the Indian treaties down there.
Wow.
And my great-grandfather's old home place is still standing there. It's one of the oldest houses in that county, and my great-grandparents are buried in a family cemetery behind that house.
Wow.
Actually, yeah.
Do you ever go there?
Yes, I go down there probably once a year. Sometimes I go more often whenever I have an opportunity to get close to it.
You know, not many people keep up with their great-grandparents and stuff anymore.
Yeah. You know, I was an only child, no brothers, no sisters. Actually, we were a part of Union County until the city took us into the city in the late 50s. And my house I live in is the one I grew up in, and it's up there behind the hospital. That was considered the country. I grew up here and left here. As I told you, I became acquainted with a lot of people that I guess in their own right, in their own era, were famous. John DeLorean, who ran Chevrolet, who invented the DeLorean car.
Right.
He was my big boss at Chevrolet when I worked there, and he was really the one attributable to the success I had at General Motors at a young age. I was the youngest person that had ever been brought into the central office at the GM building for Chevrolet, and he wanted the youth to try to be running Chevrolet. I had a good, successful run with them. And, of course, I got disenchanted with some things, and I told a friend of mine who was there when I left, I said, with this new guy they got running Chevrolet, which is Roger Smith. In fact, I think Michael Moore did a documentary called Roger and Me.
Yeah.
Well, the Roger was Roger Smith.
Oh,
He
wow.
was the chairman of the board of General Motors at that time, and I told a friend of mine, I said, I don't know what's going on, but I think this company's in the law of diminishing returns, and I'm getting out of here.
Yeah.
And I think in 2009 they declared bankruptcy. And my friend called me and reminded me what I told him the day I walked out of the GM building. It was unfortunate because General Motors was instrumental in my early life.
Right.
That instilled incentives and made me work harder to achieve more. They strictly worked on incentives. I think I told you we sold 3 million cars and trucks, Chevrolets, in 1971. First time any car manufacturer had ever done numbers like that in the history of the United States, or you might as well say the free world.
Right.
And we did that 2 or 3 years in a row while I was with Chevrolet.
That is remarkable.
Yeah.
That's a lot of vehicles.
Yeah, a good friend of mine worked in the service department in Dallas, Texas. He wound up going to the top in Chevrolet and Cadillac division, and then Toyota hired him, and he was the general sales manager for Toyota. And as I told you, he was the person who introduced the Lexus for Toyota back in the 80s, as I recall, maybe early 90s. And then he went back to Chevrolet and retired there. And But he's was instrumental in getting the Corvette Museum built in Bowling Green, Kentucky.
Wow.
If you go in that building, I think his picture's up there on the wall behind the reception desk. So I met some pretty interesting people through Chevrolet, and when I was with Merrill Lynch, I met a lot of extremely wealthy people in that business, and it was interesting because I learned how they had made their money, how they had been successful in life. One of my best friends in life I acquired through the investment business, and he was a very interesting person. He had acquired a wine collection just by a hobby to start out with, and when he passed away, he asked me to help settle his estate, and I did. And it's public record. I'm not divulging anything outside of the estate, but it's public record. We had an auction in Chicago several years ago, and we auctioned off 12,000 bottles of French wine
Oh my
from
word.
his estate. And it was the largest individual sale, I think, that had taken place at that time. And the company who did it said that he had amassed one of the last true depth wine collections of French wine anybody they had ever seen.
Wow.
And we had all the receipts and documentation where it came from.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was, people came, we sold at 38 states, and I think 6 foreign countries flew into Chicago for that auction.
Oh my goodness.
And bought that wine.
Did you keep any?
No, I had a couple of bottles that he had given me through the years, but I was also fortunate to be his good friend, and I got to taste a lot of good wine
Yeah, you did.
that otherwise I never could afford.
Right.
We had 6 bottles of one vintage that brought $130,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is remarkable. What was the oldest aged?
I think the oldest one we had was, and we couldn't auction it because the label had been disfigured in storage. It was a 1946 Chateau Margaux. And the company I've dealt with, that's all they do is wine predominantly, and they x-rayed the bottle in the cork, and the cork was marked Chateau Margaux. And they have contacts with the states and in France, and they called them and told them what they had, sent them pictures of it, and they verified it. And actually, the night after the auction was done, the family sat down to a dinner, and we actually opened that bottle. And believe you me, it's probably one of the best I've ever tasted.
Wow.
It was remarkable that it had held together that long. Bordeaux's have life, and but Burgundies have short lives.
Okay.
In the wine business.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the Burgundies don't have the long life like Bordeaux does.
Take me back to Oklahoma. What was the most memorable time you had there?
Well, I got to sit on the 50-yard line and watch OU win 2 national championships, and I never went to school there a day. But the Chevrolet dealer in Norman, Oklahoma, was a good friend of mine. And I guess those were 2 very memorable experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
To be able to see a lot of good football.
Yeah.
And ironically, at that time, there was a guy there who had been the athletic director and coached at Mississippi State, Wade, and he was the athletic director at Oklahoma at that time. But Chuck Fairbanks was the head coach, and he wound up going to the New England Patriots, and he was, which was back then, I think, the Boston Patriots, and he was head coach up there. And I got to know Barry Switzer, who was the head coach at OU at that time, through the association with my friend, the car dealer. But Oklahoma is a good state. It's very comparable to the state of Mississippi. There are a lot of people who live in Oklahoma whose ancestors actually are back here in Mississippi. It was a young state. The Oklahoma land rush, I think, was in 1906 or something like that. So it's a young state, but a lot of really good people there. And I enjoyed every place I lived in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I would live there again. they don't have as many tornadoes as they used to. The jet stream moved over here, and now we get them.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
So, besides working at Houston, what's one memory there that you
Houston,
have?
Texas.
Houston, Texas.
Well, of course, the association and friendships I made with clients, and unfortunately, some of the closest ones have since passed away. These guys were very, very intriguing. I used to go to meetings. They had a club, about a half dozen of them did, called the Diamondback Club. And each one of these guys were extremely wealthy, and they put money in an investment group, and all they invested in was oil stocks. And I remember one day we were having a meeting, and there was a guy there from another brokerage firm, and he started talking about high tech. And one of the old guys said, we don't know anything about high tech. We do know about the oil business, so we're going to stay in oil stocks. And that's what they did.
Yeah.
But one of the guys there, he was an adventure type, and he actually invested and brought public 2 high-tech companies and did extremely well with it.
Wow.
Yeah. And I guess, I met a good friend there, and his widow's still very close. There's a guy named Jimmy Lyle. He was a knife maker from Arkansas. And he came down to Oklahoma to the Houston Gun Show 4 times a year back then, and he would sell his knives. And he and I got acquainted and became extremely close friends, and that was in the mid-'70s. He and his wife didn't have children, and myself and a couple other guys about the same age, they kind of more or less adopted us as kids. And we're always, and I talked to him, but all of a sudden in the early 80s, Jimmy made the first knives for Sylvester Stallone for the First Blood movie.
That's a great movie, Rambo.
Yes, Rambo. And then he made the next one for The Mission. He made the first 2 knives for the first 2 movies. And that's what set the knife world for handmade knives on fire. People started really getting interested in that. Well, Jimmy and I were real close. He passed away in '91, and I've remained close to that family through all these years.
And you had a fun story about the first knife you ever got. Did you talk your mom into buying?
8 or 10 years old, I was wanting a knife, and my mother wouldn't buy me a knife because she was afraid I'd fall on it and cut myself. So I finally convinced her one day to go to the Army surplus store over on Highland Street that the Pittner brothers had put in after World War II. And we went in, she said, "Okay, what do you want?" And I said, "Mother, I want this." And she said, You want that?" And I said, "Yeah, it's a machete." And she said, "Well, you can't, that's too big." I said, "But Mother, it's as tall as I am. I can't fall on it." So she bought me the machete, I think for $3 or $4, and I've still got it. And that kind of started my knife career, I guess. And through the years, accumulated a pretty good size collection, and since time marched on, I've liquidated pretty much most of all of that.
But you did a lot of case knives? You collected a lot of case knives?
Yeah, collected a lot of case knives. It's unfortunate that you can't appreciate them on a day-to-day basis. People would ask me, and I said, the bank in New Albany's got them, and had to keep them there. I couldn't keep them at home.
I saw the collection. It is beautiful knives.
Yeah. Our knife club puts a collection down there every 2 months and rotates it. We've been doing that for, I guess 10, 12 years now. And
y'all were instrumental in the Iraqi guys getting knives in the Riverfest last year.
Right.
That was a wonderful thing.
Case Knife Company had contacted us to ask us if we were interested in doing something like that, and Shelby Lowry and I agreed to put together a program for them. It was very successful. I had done that once before. The Riverfest was having some rocky times, and I put a knife show together for the Riverfest. It always draws people. We had about 2,000 come to the show I had. I think there were a little over 1,000 at this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that signed in. Yeah, those have always been very good, and been good for the community, because the people who come to them would go to stores and spend money in the stores. Their family, the wives, the kids would.
And we were talking earlier about New Albany and about some of the things. What do you like about the growth that's going on with New Albany?
Well, it's certainly a lot different than when I was a kid growing up here. There wasn't 4,000 people in this town. Everybody
Right.
knew everybody. And now I don't know hardly anybody I see on the street except the ones I grew up with. And when, of course, as a kid growing up, kids 2 or 3 years older or 2 or 3 years younger, you knew them all. Now a lot of times you only know the kids you're in the same grade with. But New Albany has grown. It's grown steady. Not grown as fast as I'd like to have seen it grown. But somebody asked me one time they wanted to see it really boom, and I said, "Well, wait just a minute. You want it to grow. What do you want? Do you want quality growth or just numbers?" There's a difference.
That is a difference.
And living around the country and living in small communities and medium and large cities, when you're growing a community, hopefully you can grow it to everybody's benefit and grow it with a quality of life. It's not a matter of just how many people are on the population statistics every 10 years. You've got to have good people. New Albany's been fortunate, I think, through the years because we've got a good school system. Not only in the city but in the county, and kids have had an opportunity for doors to open that they probably never would have had it not been for the education. New Albany, the industrial side of it has grown, in my opinion, better since Toyota came around than before. It was pretty much a one-sided business, furniture. Which, my credit to furniture. Furniture was what put this town on the map. And I think that the furniture industry expanded like it did, and it provided jobs for people who otherwise would have left here. I mean, I was an example. In 1967, when I got out of college, the basic thing in New Albany was you had one furniture plant to go to work. And friends of mine who had just gotten out of college 2 or 3 years before had gone to work there, and they had all the good jobs. So I knew that if I went to work there, it was going to be 30 years till they retired before I'd ever get that good job.
Right.
So I left here seeking something else. But now there are opportunities in the medical profession and Toyota and the furniture industry and other type of industries that's come in here that offer people opportunities to raise a family in a good environment and educate them.
And the people that did stay in the agriculture has now got agritourism.
Sure.
I mean, there are several places around here that do that.
Yes, yeah, that's right. We developed a good museum here that has chronicled the history of the community, probably more so than most people realize, unless they go over there and visit and see really what this county evolved from.
We've got the Tallahatchie Arts Council.
Yes.
We got the people that are fine artists, and we have crafters. And
yeah, I was vice president of the Tallahatchie Arts Council at one time, and I think at that time they determined there were 40 to 50 local artists in the community, and I'm talking about Union County as a whole. That's quite a number of people.
It is, and we would love to get those people back involved. The people that make the jewelry, the pottery people, the painters, everybody.
Yeah.
So I mean, if y'all are out there, come be a part of the Arts Council. Get this stuff spread around, y'all.
Yeah, I tried to be a big proponent of the library. I think that's a very, very important part of the community.
It is.
And I tried to do what I could there. I think that the library plays an important part in your community.
It does.
And you need to support it.
One thing that I think about when I think about New Albany is the buildings that we have here, then the businesses that are past. I grew up at Myrtle. We didn't come to town a lot. And so I don't remember what used to be where. So just as we end the program today, walk us through a little bit of who used to be where in the buildings.
And like downtown?
And like downtown and Main Street and Bankhead.
Well, as a kid growing up, if you come into town on the River Bridge, on the left, there used to be a grocery store there. I think the name of it was Barclays. There's a little white building there. Across the street from it, the side street there, where the karate place was McLaren Ice Cream Company. And next to it was a big service station garage, as I recall. That's where Barclay Travel is now. And next door to that was Harwell's Distribution Company, which is owned by Jim Henson now.
Yeah.
And you come on up the street, and there was a couple of retail establishments and jewelry stores. Right before you get to Wyndham Appliance, there's a building on the left there that used to be a dry goods store, but before that, as I recall, it was a movie theater.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is that the one they call it Dixie?
I can't remember what the name of that one was, but it burned. I remember going to a movie there when I was a young kid. And then, of course, Herman Wyndham's at one time was, I think Mr. Holmes had a Firestone store there. And then there was a medical supply there. And then as you, next door was the Chevrolet dealership, Park Chevrolet. And then you come on up the street where Jim Allen Browning's accounting is. That was Whiteway Cafe.
What was in the building the City Hall's in now?
The Bank of Commerce.
I thought it was
First
a
National
bank. Yeah.
Yeah, across the street was a bank in New Albany, but it's next to Sappington's Dry Goods. From that building where Sappington's is, and there was Rogers Drug Store.
They used to have an ice cream, the
That's
soda
right,
bar.
they had a soda bar
I
in
do
there.
remember that.
And then there was West Grocery, Lynn West. Family had a grocery store where Vanessa's used to be.
Okay.
And then the next one was Gray's Drug Store. They had a ice cream, they had a bar there too. And then you went on down to the New Way store.
I remember
owned by
New
the
Way.
Tate family.
Yeah.
Then you went down to, there was a grocery store there, Ferguson's. President Ferguson had a grocery store around where Merrill Norman is. And then on the corner there where Southern Traditions is was McCullough Long McCullough had put in a store. Across the alley there was Jackson Hardware, where Alan Jackson's accounting is. And next door to it was Van Atkins store. And before Van Atkins, it was called Houston Dry Goods. Mr. Jamie Houston and that family owned that. And then across the alley was Hamilton Hardware. And it stretched all the way down to, I think that yellow brick building that Herman Wyndham owns, I believe was a barber shop at one time, and then next door to it was a pool room. And then was Harrison Motor Company, which burned.
Yeah.
And then where Farm Bureau is was, I think, a Standard Oil service station, and on the corner there where there's nothing there now was a little building that was a Shell oil station. And that was pretty much was Bankhead
Yeah.
at that time. And then, of course, you come across the tracks going north. It was this building, and then Cat's Drug Store was across the street. Chapman's Drug Store was here. Edgar Hall's Barber Shop. But back in my grandfather's day, Edgar Hall's Barber Shop served as a local post office back in the 30s while they were building the post office, which is now the Welcome Center across from the courthouse next to Bank in the Albany. Behind this building, the Henderson building, was Bill Rowland's Dry Cleaners, but before all of that was the telephone company.
Did they have the switchboards?
Switchboards and all. That was the telephone company. Pretty well encompassed the central part of town. Main Street, known as the Jockey Yard back there. You've heard history of that. There was a cotton gin where Ferret's Dollar Store is. There was a Rogers Farm Supply where the Redesigning Women's is.
Okay.
Yeah, and there were grocery stores back there. And Stagg's Hamburgers was behind Alan Jackson's, which is now Latham's Hamburgers.
Okay.
And Wallace Stagg's family, I believe, started that actually. And then you come on up the street, and there was another grocery store on the corner across from Alan Jackson's back parking lot. And that's actually where I think Curtis Daniel got started, who later became a big star dealer. He had 2 stores here and 1 in Holly Springs. And then you come on up the street and there was a Napa Auto Parts store, and then Pfeiffer Furniture Company, which is now Wiseman's.
Union Appliance, yeah.
That's Union Appliance.
And the Rainy Hotel was...
The Rainy Hotel, yeah, was behind the Bank of Commerce. There was a guy there named O'Connor, Jack Connors, who used to run the restaurant and the hotel when I was a kid. And we used to go there. He had white tablecloths, and we would go in there and eat lunch after church. And I remembered that from being when I was growing up here, it was still there. And then it burned after it became vacant and all.
Mm-hmm.
And it was pretty much a big spot. And then there was another pool room around the corner that I actually owned. I had bought that from the family after I moved back here. And the GM&O and the Frisco cross tracks, there was a beautiful depot there that New Albany didn't step in and try to salvage it because it was been a real landmark. A lot of the pool hustlers in the southeastern part of the United States used to change trains there, passenger trains.
Wow.
The Frisco went to Birmingham, the GM&O went to the Gulf Coast and Mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And they would sit there and wait for trains to come through, but while they were waiting on the next train, they'd come across to the pool hall and shoot pool. And I used to sit there and marvel at some of the shots they would make.
So, do you remember was there any big names?
No, there was. I remember one guy that I learned a lot about. I'd seen him in there 2 or 3 times and played with him, but he considered himself a book salesman. I don't know how many books he ever sold, but he sure could play pool.
What did you learn from him? Just how to bake shot and all that?
How to hold a cue stick and how to shoot.
That's cool.
And there's several kids around here I grew up with. I can think of one in mind who is still living, and we used to play a lot together.
Yeah.
I gave that up a long time ago when I started wearing glasses.
Makes a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes a difference. It does.
Thank you so much, Bill, for coming and talking to us today.
You're quite welcome.
I have had such a history lesson. I have learned so much.
Well.
And you've had a very interesting life.
Yeah, been a lot of places, done a lot of things.
Yeah, and I appreciate all you're doing for the area, too.
Well, I've pretty well withdrawn from some of it. I'm still interested. I still want the community to do well and the people. I've always felt like I could help people who are wanting to be helped. Help people strive for the things they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I learned it through hard work, perseverance, and tenacity. Some people don't like my tenacity, but
it's got you where you are today.
At this point in life, I'm fireproof.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome.
And thank you all for joining us here today on From the Heart. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to, if you're watching this on YouTube, leave them down below. Or if you're watching them on the station, we're going to leave you an address up there so that you can write in and let us hear from you. So thank you for joining us here From the Heart on Hill Country Network, and we hope to see you next time.